Let's turn to public safety. This year is the 25th anniversary of the birth of Boston's Operation Ceasefire, otherwise known as the Boston Miracle. That was an innovative effort to reverse an epidemic of deadly gun violence based on unprecedented cooperation between Boston police, federal, state, and county law enforcement, street workers, and clergy. For years, it was a national model, then it fell apart. Do you understand why it fell apart? What will you do to fix it, or do you prefer an alternate model to the Boston Miracle?
I think the Boston Miracle is one example of the creative, community-based solutions to addressing gun violence in the city of Boston. I'm really proud of my public safety plan. It was vetted and reviewed by officers within our department, retired officers, our district attorney, Suffolk County Sheriff Steve Tompkins, so many others, including residents. And it's the most comprehensive and specific plan of any candidate in this race. And it's twofold. One, it says we need to restructure our police department so that every single neighborhood has an adequate number of officers actually walking the beat, engaging in community policing as a way, of course, to reduce incidents of violence in the community. But the second piece of my plan is just as important. It says when we actually restructure our department, we will save millions of dollars, reining in a very absorbent $400 million police budget, $70 million overtime budget. We will rein in those costs by that restructuring. And then what can we do with those resources? We can redirect them to the root causes of violence and to some of these creative community-based solutions, and respond, of course, by investing in jobs, moving people out of poverty, mental health, trauma, including substance use disorder, which we know is on full display at the intersection of Mass and Cass, where the city of Boston absolutely needs to do more work with respect to that issue too.
Well, first, thinking about that question around education and our responsibility as a city, and my responsibility as mayor of this city, it is to educate our kids, create opportunities for housing, and so much more. But also on that list is creating a safe city, working in partnership with community-based organizations, our city's residents, and our Boston Police Department. And that needs to and should very much include a faith-based effort. We need to make sure that every partner is at the table when we think about the work of keeping our communities safe, preventing violence, and responding to crime. It is so important as a city that we don't return to what we saw in the 90s, what we saw and needed a response to when we think about that work of the Boston Miracle. We have work to do. We are seeing an increase in crime across our city in every part, in every neighborhood, and we need to respond to all of it every day. We owe it to our city's residents. It is a focus point of mine as a city councilor today, and I will lead on this issue. As mayor, we have to protect our city's residents. Children should never be afraid to go to the playground or walk to school. Older Bostonians should never worry about sitting on the front porch and watching, a warm summer night. We have so much work to do. We have to do it in partnership, both community-based organizations and our Boston Police Department. When we think about the work and the celebration of our community policing model here in the city of Boston, we need to double down on those efforts. We need to renew that certificate of a model city and get back to work, but it has to be done in partnership. Too often, one voice, one community member, and the police department are left out of this work. We need to do this and do it together and do it quickly. No other family should experience loss, should be the victim of violence, and have the trauma that it brings to our neighborhoods day in and day out.
I am certainly very appreciative of all initiatives that bring people together, and when we see results that work. Right now, I am focused on the future of our city and what is happening on the ground. I live, John, in a neighborhood where there is gun violence, unfortunately, right on my street. It has happened in front of my house on numerous occasions, in the park that is across the street from my house on numerous occasions. And so this issue is something that hits me personally. And I understand the trauma that is associated with it and the need to make sure that we have a good trauma response. to these issues. I am proud to say, as mayor of Boston, that right now our homicides are down in 2021 as compared to 2020. Our fatal shootings are down. Our non-fatal shootings are down. We have gun recovery and gun arrest up. I launched a summer safety plan at the beginning of the end of spring last year, along with the district attorney, Rachel Rollins, and I'm proud to see the progress that we have made here. Let me be really clear. While all of this is down, homicides, fatal shootings, non-fatal shootings, and that's progress, I don't want to see any shootings in our community. Any shooting is problematic. And we know that we've got to focus on prevention, intervention. We have to address trauma. We have to make sure that there are economic opportunities, and we've got to focus on education, the subject that we just talked about. That is how we break generational cycles of crime, of violence in our community. We cannot do it if we're not addressing all three of those things: education, economic opportunities, and trauma. That is the work that I continue to focus on as mayor of Boston, so that we can all live in neighborhoods where there is safety, healing, justice, and peace. That is what Boston residents deserve. And I will also add, John, as mayor, I have done more to make sure that there is transparency and accountability than any of my predecessors, and releasing files, as well as how we imagine policing. I've recently launched a pilot investing millions of dollars with an alternative response, a co-response, and a community response to how we handle mental health crises in our city. That is going to help us move forward in a way to really make sure we're dealing with trauma, and that we are not over-policing certain communities here in Boston.
We know what works in Boston, which is that when we fund youth opportunity, when we engage stakeholders across all sectors and lean in, bringing clergy members and civic associations and nonprofits and those who are already doing the work in community into the conversation to follow and for city government to follow their lead, that leads to results, not just in public safety, but across the board. And in this particular case, I think it is important to point out as well that we saw tremendous declines in homicides and other major metrics of public safety. But we also need to make sure that how our police are interacting with community reinforces trust and isn't just concentrating the community interactions, whether you call it stop and frisk or call it field interrogation stops as Boston does. We need to ensure that we are truly connecting the entire ecosystem of public safety with public health. So much of the calls that come into our officers today are for situations that they may not feel best equipped to deal with, related to individuals living with mental illness or homelessness or substance use. And so I fully, wholeheartedly am eager to back and move a plan that includes public safety, targeting young people and creating opportunity and building these community coalitions, because we know that works. But it's not enough just to say, let's create opportunity and then enforce and bring down the hammer on those who are maybe outside the target area of those efforts. We need to ensure that we are also, in addition, transforming how we think about policing to be more inclusive of public health, to have accountability and transparency, and to truly reflect one part of an entire ecosystem where our families are stable in their housing, eager and comfortable with safe and healthy streets, have access to the resources in schools, are connected to transportation and jobs. This all fits together.
John, nothing beats the community partnerships that we saw during the Boston Miracle. Police working with the faith-based community, the community organizations, community leaders. I remember being a part of the coalitions that were formed through the Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative and the work that I did in Roxbury. It was critical, in fact, that we had communication, open lines, that we had tables where we can all sit and talk about what was happening and what we needed to do better. As mayor, making sure that we have a table where everyone can sit to solve problems together is what I'm going to be all about. It's how I did my work in the neighborhoods. It's how Boston has made improvements in safety. It's how we've made improvements in any area that we've made improvements in. It is critical that Boston police continue to have those relationships throughout our neighborhoods.